Welcome to our viewer on our atomic adventures.
Welcome to the fourth part of the Life of Tom Ploy, and in this video we are covering years 21 to 28. We continue where we left you in the last video where Tom and Cindy were still on their own.
Making a life for himself?
Yes, well that was the idea anyway.
Sounds like he had an early intervention.
Well, now you mention it. While at work around his 21st birthday, he was working in a church hall and started coming down the scaffolding for lunch. We say scaffolding, but it was more like a relic from the past and looked very Heath Robinson.
Think it's called rat rig.
That's it, and was made of wood and not very secure. Just think of Fred Dibner.
Google him.
It's strange how you get used to walking the plank.
Aye, Jim lad.
Didn't even need to have to look down, as you get used to telling where the edge of the plank was by feel alone, which is handy when you're 5 metres up.
Sorry interrupted you then.
Not for the first time.
Won't be the last time either. So he was trying to come down.
Yes, it was lunchtime, and as he lowered himself off the plank suddenly the cross joist rotated and he lost grip about 5 metres up. As he fell, his legs got caught on the side crossbars which rotated him to fall head first, and he landed on the back of his head. Still conscious but winded, he remembers getting on his hands and knees and unable to breathe. Then the thought that went through his mind was, is this how I die? And what felt like minutes, but was likely to be only 30 seconds, he gasped and finally started breathing again.
Concussed again, right? And another ambulance ride.
That would have been ideal, but unfortunately all they did was put him in the back of the car.
Did they look after him?
He's no idea, as he was out of it a lot of the time, just waking up long enough to be sick and then black out again.
How long was he left there?
It was 3 hours later when the boss got back, and once they'd cleaned up, they escorted him to hospital.
About bloody time.
You would have thought, but they decided to drive past the local hospital.
What the fig?
As they thought it a better idea to drive another 20 miles back home, if you included the time in the back of the car, which resulted in a wait of 5 hours in total, before he saw a doctor.
I expect he had to stay in hospital.
He remembers being woken up every hour to have a light shone in his eyes.
So he had a lucky escape again.
It felt like it at the time, but the problems only started getting worse with headaches and visual disturbances, then onto full-blown migraines. Ones when you get visual side effects.
What sort of thing?
This manifested into where it looked like his vision was run through a filter of a bowl of worms where the whole image was wriggling. And by the beginning of the next video, we can tell you about the rare side effect of this injury that gave him an unusual superpower.
We'll be the judge of that.
But if you would like a clue, just think of the antithesis of a Jonathan Swift book. It certainly focuses the mind, and you have a choice of why me or lucky me to even be alive, and he went for the latter. But he didn't realise how it would affect him. As we'll see later, and he would take risks, and some were good, and others very ill-advised.
It sounds like he doesn't produce enough adrenaline.
But with this new lease for life and no one being negative, the next few years ended up being a very enjoyable way to spend time while waiting for that someone special to arrive.
So what did he do?
He'd always fancied a trial bike.
That was a good idea considering the state of the potholes in the roads. And very good for off-roading.
But not for your health?
Not again.
Of course he was on a deserted piece of track miles from home. But as it didn't disturb anyone, especially the rozzers, so there you could practice your technique. And while doing this, he hit a rock and lack of skill made the front wheel flip and the bike fell on him.
Ouch.
Ouch indeed, as the footrest ripped a hole in his bike suit. On inspection, he noticed a 10 centimetres red circle of chewed up skin and a strange white patch the size of your thumbnail in the middle. It wasn't until the next day that he realised it was in fact the patella bone that he could see through the blood.
When the footrest dug into his knee.
That's it. But first he had to get home.
Call the AA.
No mobiles back then, so no way of contacting anybody.
What did he do?
He had no choice. He just had to ride it home. He was still okay to change gear and use the front brake after he'd straightened the brake and clutch levers.
Sweet.
The big problem was he couldn't bend his right knee, so he was unable to apply the rear brake.
But he got back okay, if a bit battered and bruised.
Yes, and as it was late he went straight to bed, just left his knee out to get some air. On waking the next day and still seeing the bone, it was decided that a trip to the hospital might be a good idea, where half a dozen stitches pulled it back together.
So no dancing for a while?
Oh, he still went to the nightclub, but any dancing was put on hold.
But it was a good icebreaker though, and he had to cancel any sporting events for a while.
Yes, he loved playing sports, including tennis.
Court or table?
Both. Plus badminton, which was his favourite, and even played against a county-level player.
Yes, she had him running all over the place.
And she certainly raised the level of his game. Of course, there was a lot of drinking and clubbing, with him doing his best John Travolta impression.
It's surprising how fit you can get by dancing.
Indeed. And it's fascinating how friendly most women can be when you're not actively trying to chat them up.
But didn't he get a couple of strange reactions from that small group of women, though?
Oh, you mean those who get offended if you dare turn down their offer?
Offer?
Yes, the offer to where he would sleep that night.
Even after you've mentioned you have a girlfriend?
That's right, as he was only there for the ships and giggles and had already been bitten.
Just not his thing. And to be fair, the dancing is a lot more fun than the circuit training he did as an athlete. He wasn't actively looking for anyone special and wouldn't find anyone suitable in a random hookup.
Then he met someone out of the blue. They got chatting and found out that both of them were going to the same nightclub that weekend. At this time, he was with a group of people that used to organise a weekly coach outing to clubs further away.
So is that where they got together?
Strangely, no. He went over to chat to her, but she said she was with her friends.
Well, that didn't go to plan.
Not quite, but he just said no problem. And if she fancied a chat, he would be free for her. Just let him know.
What did he do then?
As it was never a problem finding a dance partner. The usual thing he did when he was with the group of friends he came with and danced the night away.
I'm guessing it was a bit awkward when they saw each other on Monday morning.
Not at all. In fact, when they did chat, it felt different, but to be honest, she did seem a bit keener then. So they arranged to meet up for a date and things went from there.
And it soon became obvious he'd met someone who genuinely wanted to spend time with him.
Yes. This encounter changed his expectations of what a relationship could be like with someone who truly wanted to be with him. Suddenly, the things you do aren't as important. And yet you end up doing more things together?
What do you mean?
Like parties, clubbing. He even got his taste for live shows that stuck with him throughout his life. And I'll call them holidays, but that would be like calling a Lamborghini a car. This becomes one of those highlight points in life, full of exhilarating travel experiences. Pretty soon he was on his first trip abroad and it was great. But they both found that sitting around a pool, as nice as it was, just wasn't what either of them wanted to do. So plans were put in place to have a couple of adventures. The next trip started in Greece near the Corinth Canal, a room with a gorgeous sea view just a stone's throw away, then onto a cruise ship where they visited and explored some of the Greek islands, and as usual for him, things didn't go totally to plan as they hit one hell of a storm. And yes, you know it would be him who went out on the deck for a better experience and got thrown up against the railings, nearly going over the side.
Plonker?
Indeed, but you wouldn't expect anything else really. Next port on call was to Israel, with them visiting Jerusalem, Bethlehem, the Golden Mosque and the Wailing Wall.
Back to the boat?
Absolutely, an overnight voyage took then to the dock at Alexandria in Egypt, where they went on to explore Cairo and went into the pharaoh's burial chamber inside the pyramid and even got to see the Tutankhamun exhibition in the Cairo Museum.
Sounds ideal.
It was right up until those final steps, when after landing back home he was met at the airport by his sibling.
Unusual. And it's funny in hindsight that when you recall events through your life to finally realise the maternal and paternal sides of his family behaved and treated others completely different.
Yes, the fact he was being helpful should have set off alarms.
So what was the problem?
He quickly and rudely dismissed his friend, so he could tell him that his dad was in hospital with bowel cancer and not likely to come out.
Wow, that was sudden.
For Tom, it was totally out of the blue. But not for the rest of the family, as they had known for a while but didn't want to spoil his holiday.
Well, that backfired drastically.
It certainly did. You can only imagine the guilt he felt for having such a great time when his dad was suffering. And for the next 6 weeks he kept flipping between those two opposite ends of emotion. 1 second on a bedside vigil of a loving father, then back on another pre-arranged adventure, this time around the Austrian Tyrol region. It was like a film set from The Sound of Music, and they'd visit Venice.
And will probably explain his lack of enthusiasm for Venice in the group flights. It's a beautiful place, just the timing was bad to see boats and bridges.
Okay, where was I? Oh yes, then returning home and watching the only family that liked and understood Tom, going from a pillar of strength to losing the fight, and prefers not to think of his father like that?
I can now see why it took many years before he could even think about a similar type of adventure.
Totally understandable, and as you can imagine, these two extremes became entangled and blurred, and all logical thinking went out the window.
I'm not sure self-medication with alcohol helped.
No, not the best idea he's had, but grief comes in many forms and stages, and there wasn't a lot of clear thinking going on, and if he's honest, the next few months are a blur. And again, he found himself alone apart from his guardian. Yet again, he's reminded that life is brief and don't put off the things you want to do.
Anyway, back to the script. You're rambling again?
Sorry, where was I?
You were about to tell us when things started to improve.
Okay. He was in touch with someone who he'd met the previous year who was the sister of a childhood friend, who'd visited them regularly over Tom's early years. Although he admits he had noticed her the previous year, he was with someone at the time, so their interactions remained on a friendly basis. But you know that feeling when you meet someone and think to yourself, I'd like to spend more time in their company?
Rambling again?
Anyway, I think she felt sorry for him, and she offered to set him up with her friend on a blind date as a sort of late birthday present.
Was she too tight to buy him a present?
Possibly, so she arranged to bring her friend up to meet him. But even on first impressions, she wasn't his type.
So what if she'd been a petite, blue-eyed blonde?
She was, and as I say, not his type. And he definitely wasn't her type either. But they did become friends.
Where did he go from there?
For him, it was that light bulb moment that he'd realised that she was in fact the reason he'd agreed to meet up and not her friend. As he'd already found what he was looking for, they spent the night together.
That was quick.
No, not that. They stayed up all night talking.
And drinking?
Yeah, a whiskey for him and brandy for her.
A whiskey?
Okay, a bottle of whiskey.
Yes, and they haven't stopped talking since.
Things moved on pretty quick, but when you know, you know. And the only negative was the 50 miles distance between them. Long weekends and late nights did the trick, and within weeks the thoughts of a more permanent arrangement blossomed and the discussions of where, when and how they would merge their lives together. And with the idea that a marriage felt like the right solution.
And there were tax benefits to being married at the time?
Indeed, and the first date mentioned was going to be Valentine's Day.
I bet she thought he was being romantic.
Possibly, but it didn't take long before she realised that he's just not good with dates.
Or names. And now I understand why they got married on the 1st of April with a normal wedding.
Well, if you count spending 2 hours at the vet's because Cindy had cut her paw open on some glass and needed stitches normal.
At least it wasn't him needing medical attention this time.
But we will find out as long as they had each other, then what they did wasn't as important.
Oh, and he had to be back at work the next day, so no time to rest.
It soon became obvious that they needed a place of their own, and in those days being self-employed with only 1 year of books was a financial obstacle, and all the options available to them were, let's say, less than preferable. They discussed all sorts of alternatives, and during a head-scratching brainstorming session over a light libation, he said, "You know, I reckon it would just be easier to build one."
The seed was sown, and the research began.
But the price of land was on the rise all over. They had friends who lived in a small village nearby, and to say that it was an up-and-coming area would be an understatement. It was certainly a place to get a bargain, though, as the price of the land was a quarter of the price of a similar-sized plot only 5 miles away. But it only made financial sense if you took a long-term view. They were trying to work out finances, and the only way to do it was to get a personal bank loan for the land and use their savings to pay for an architect and the legal fees, etc. So, within 12 months of meeting, they had purchased the land, finalised the building plans, and secured a plentiful amount of enthusiasm.
It turned out that they would need plenty of that.
The next step involved earning enough money to buy the building materials.
And what to do while they saved?
Remember, this was when self-building houses was a rare event, and banks wouldn't even supply a building loan until you had reached the first floor level.
As anyone who's done a self-build will know that 75% of the work, but only 50% of the cost, will get you to a first floor level.
True, so the decision they had to make was either hire an excavator to level the ground and dig out the foundation.
Sounds like a good plan.
Or, the problem with that was, if they hired a digger for a couple of days, there'd be no money left to buy the ready-mixed concrete and bricks.
Bugger.
Another option was to save up for 6 to 9 months, then start the groundwork. Although that would mean starting at the end of the next summer.
So which one did they go for?
Neither. As he came up with a third option, and that is the one they went for.
Oh, and now? You mentioned there's a third option?
Yeah, sorry, okay, they decided that he'd make a start by levelling the land by hand. As he's not one for sitting about and waiting for things to happen. Hold on, I've just been told he will add a couple more images at the end.
If he remembers.
Yeah, that would be embarrassing.
So he thought that scratching the surface was a good idea.
He did, and sort of got carried away, and 4 months later the digging stopped and the filling began. The first thing was the concrete foundations.
Thank goodness for that. So how many ready-mixed concrete lorry loads did that take?
Still had the same problem with lack of funds available.
So what did they do?
Well, the first thing was to sell his motorbike and buy the only powered piece of equipment they had on site, a 3 cubic foot cement mixer. Don't forget there was no electricity on site and battery-powered tools were decades away. So apart from mixing mortar and concrete, everything had to be done by hand, using only hand tools.
Don't like the sound of that.
They worked out that if they bought the raw materials, they'd just about have enough money to buy the first load of bricks as well.
Bet that was a few bags of ballast and sand.
You're thinking far too small, as they used to purchase them by the 10 or 20 ton lorry load, direct from the quarry, and a 1 ton pallet of bags of cement, which had to be unloaded by hand.
And he mixed all that in a little mixer.
Yep, he'd shovel it in, and while it was mixing, he'd wheelbarrow the previous mix.
How long did that take?
Roughly 16 hours a day for 3 days. Just in time for the first lorry load of bricks direct from the local brickworks.
So now it was at a stage where he could start laying the bricks.
Yes? I thought you might ask that, and he was thinking the same thing, that this might be a good time to learn to lay bricks.
Wouldn't that have been a better idea to learn that before starting this project?
Okay, I'll give you that, but it hadn't crossed his mind yet.
What a twunk! But then again, it's not rocket science, is it?
And why am I thinking of an ancient Egyptian king?
Anyway, so when did he learn bricklaying?
He practiced on a back corner, and that seemed to go okay. So started all the laying out of the positions of all of the walls.
How did he get on with using theodolites and lasers?
Glad you asked.
You're welcome.
It was going to take a bit of lateral thinking and a lot of hard work.
Understatement?
No fancy stuff. It was done with a spirit level, tape measure, string, and a 20 meters length of rubber tubing, with the clear bit from a Bic pen inserted in the ends and a few scraps of timber.
And that was all that he needed?
Yes, and a grasp of basic trigonometry.
Piece of pish?
Indeed. And in the 6 months it would have taken to save enough money to start work, they had the groundwork done.
So, what did he learn?
That anything is possible if you have the right person by your side.
Did they apply to go on Grand Designs?
It would have been hard, as that particular TV show didn't become a thing until almost 20 years later.
Is there a lot more to this story?
Yes, but I think the rest of that story could be a whole video all by itself. So we'll leave them there.
And if we need to, we can pick it up again later.
But we will say that they had moved in after 2 years, and the only negative was a bit of maternal guilt tripping when they finally moved in.
That all?
Well, when they moved in, the house was still a building site and a bit basic.
What do you mean?
It only had painted concrete floors with a piece of old carpet in the middle of the living room. And every time it was vacuumed, the edges would slowly disappear.
So not too bad?
No, but a kitchen would have been nice, but that would have to wait.
So when did they get on their honeymoon?
It took 3 years to finally get away.
I bet they needed a break by then.
Yes, it would be good to have some time to themselves, and away from the final touches that still needed his attention at home. Well, not quite on their own.
What do you mean, did it not go well?
No, it was very enjoyable. It was more that they didn't go on their own.
Excuse me?
Okay, you remember the blonde, blind date we mentioned earlier that got them together? Well, she came with them.
Things are looking up.
Stop right there. Okay, they were close friends, but not that close.
And that's the story he's sticking to?
Absolutely. The next few years in this period were spent homemaking and busy building a business.
So no bad or ugly?
Well, no ugly anyway. And considering what they'd just done, it turned out to be one of the least stressful periods in his life.
But no hospital visits?
Well, there were plenty of blisters, and only a couple of minor incidents that needed a doctor. The Life of Tom Ploy is a foul attire production. Now, hold on to your hats as we do a bit of padding out with some AI music.
Welcome to our viewer on our atomic adventures. This journey starts at 21 and goes to year 28. Come and see what we're up to today. Who knows, we might have some fun and even have a dance along the way. is at the start, so let's not delay. Fire up the engine and get in the skies right away. We'll follow the life of Trompe-l'œil. Let's start at the beginning and take a view of his life right to the end.
Underneath the willow trees, where the cool winds play, I strum my guitar softly as the sun fades away. The river sings a melody, sweet as it flows. With every note I'm weaving a story that grows. So come and gather round, let the music be found. With the strum and the hum, hear the joy in the sound. Let the harmonica cry under the wide open sky. We'll dance to the rhythm as time passes by. And in the quiet moments when the night settles deep, the stars start to glisten as the world falls asleep. We'll hold on to this magic, forever we'll keep. With dreams that flow like rivers, in harmony we leap. So come and gather round, let the music be found. With the strum and the hum, hear the joy in the sound. Let the harmonica cry under the wide open sky. We'll dance to the rhythm as time passes by. And in the quiet moments when the night settles deep, the stars start to glisten as the world falls asleep. We'll hold on to this magic, forever we'll keep. With dreams that flow like rivers,